My name is Sriram, and we are here to launch a program for all the aspirants. And our objectives are two. No one should miss coaching. That is, for want of financial resources, for want of having to come to Delhi and so on. And no one should be miscoached. Now, how are we going to do this? To understand the requirement of preparing for the civil services examination, you need to know the syllabus, the methodology, the do's and don'ts and all that. There can't be a list of do's and don'ts. In every lecture, for hours together, when we discuss by following the norms that are necessary for successful understanding of the subject. You know, a subject can be understood from multiple dimensions, but there is only one dimension that the UPSC demands that you know. And we've been teaching for civil services aspirants, and we have over the years sort of figured out what it takes for the aspirants to make it. After all, you're putting in your time, your effort, your everything. Your aspiration is equal to you. You sleep this aspiration. You walk this aspiration, drink this aspiration, and therefore you have to be a successful aspirant, for which you should know what to study, how to study, what not to study, what concepts you need to master, how to present your answer. All of them will be dealt with every day in our 3-hour classes. And for you to be able to have a feel of what you are getting from the classes commencing on the 12th of April, here is my lecture about a very important topic, fairly difficult topic, and it interfaces with public finance as well. And the topic happens to be the parliamentary control over union budget. That is, parliamentary control over public finance, union budget being the face of government finance. So let's get started. Parliamentary passage of the budget. See, in 1215 in Britain, there was a mutiny by the barons, that is the social leaders. What did the mutiny about? They told the king, you are spending money arbitrarily, you are waging wars at your own wish, you are collecting taxes, and those who are not paying taxes, their houses are being occupied and taken away, and you are being unilateral. There is no consultation, there is no rule of law, and there is no fairness in the whole process of governance, of which the fiscal governance, that is imposition and collection and use of the tax money. As a result, Magna Carta came. Magna Carta 1215, that laid the foundations for the rule of law that unfolded over the next 800 plus years. And that got taken to a fairly extreme level in the 17th century by the British colonies in America. They said British Parliament is imposing and collecting taxes from us. They have been unfair. They are almost extorting money from us. But we are not there in the British Parliament. We are not taking decisions. And who is safeguarding our financial interests? Nobody. Therefore, they created a slogan called no taxation without representation, because if our representatives are there, they represent our needs, financial needs and other needs, and they won't allow the executive to extort money from us. Therefore, let us be represented in the legislature. Only then, after the legislature endorses the executive proposals, we could be taxed. That is how the entire phenomenon of Parliament controlling the public finance began. How was that reflected in the Indian Constitution as far as the Indian Parliament controlling the union budget is concerned. It starts with Article 112, where you are told that the President of India is responsible for having the union budget for the upcoming financial year presented in the Parliament. And the responsibility of the President has been delegated to the Union Finance Minister, who has been authorized by the President to present the union budget. And 112 talks a few more things about the union budget. We'll know in course of our discussion. So what is a budget? It is technically called annual financial statement. Annual financial statement. It's a statement of the receipts of the government, expenditure of the government. In the receipts, what do you have? You have what you earn and what you borrow. In the expenditure, what you have? What you spend on your consumption, that is salaries, subsidies and so on, and what you spend on investment, that is capital formation, roads and buildings and so on. And this makes up the annual financial statement, which is equal to the union budget. You don't know what's going to be the picture in the upcoming fiscal year. That is why you are referring to the numbers as estimates. Estimates are guesstimates. You can only project based upon your experience in the previous year and a few years before, get the pattern and the trend and project it. And wherever you are projecting based upon certain numbers, you call them estimates. They are not calculations. Calculations depend upon actual numbers. So even in Article 112, the term used is estimates. Now, so how does the process proceed? The entire budgetary process, how does it proceed? It starts on the 1st of February of the year which precedes the year for which the numbers are relevant. That is, if you are saying 45 lakh crores of rupees will be the budgetary expenditure of 23-24, that budget is presented on the 1st of February, which is 2 months before the year for which the budget is relevant. Now, on the appointed day, which is the 1st of February, the Honorable Finance Minister presents the budget in the Lok Sabha. Budget is presented in the Lok Sabha. After the budget is presented, a copy is laid in the Rajya Sabha. So, the budget speech has part A and part B. Part A, part B. Part A is the Honorable Finance Minister gives a speech, introduces policies, speaks about the performance of the economy, and then tells us about the macro numbers for various aspects of the economy, for example, fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, primary deficit, effective revenue deficit. All these she tells us as a part of the part A speech, and with that the part A closes. After that, part B begins, and part B is what? Finance bill. What is a finance bill? Finance bill is equal to all the taxation proposals that the government introduces in the Lok Sabha on the budget day. We want the tax to be introduced. We want the tax rate to be lowered or increased. We want the tax to be regulated like this. We are clarifying about the corporate tax and so on and so forth. So all proposals related to taxation matters as a part of the budgetary process are built into finance bill. And with the introduction and elaboration of the finance bill, the day comes to an end. The Lok Sabha is adjourned. Lok Sabha is adjourned. That is, The Honorable Speaker of Lok Sabha says, we will meet after 2-3 days, 3-4 days. Till then we won't be meeting because we are putting off the sitting for a few days because you have to go home, understand the minutiae of the budget. Remember the good old saying, devil is in detail, God resides in the headlines. So you go home, all the members of the parliament, all the public policy makers, ex-policy makers, and NGOs and investment banks and others, let all of them go home and digest what has been proposed. And based on that, after 3-4 years, the Lok Sabha proceedings resume, and you call the proceedings after the resumption in a few days general discussion. General discussion. That is, you're not going into specifics. You are discussing the budget generally. All the members of the parliament take the permission of the Honorable Speaker and speak about the budget. Some say the budget is glorious. It is investment-led, it is inclusion-led, it is forward-looking, it is meant for Amrit Kal, where it is going to make us a developed country, and so on and so forth. Some members criticize the budget, saying it is inflationary, it is consumption-driven, it is not going to lead to capital formation, it is giving too much scope to the corporate sector at the expense of the common man. Whatever they think the budget is about, they will say that. And this discussion goes on for about a week or so, or a little longer. That depends upon the business of the House. After the general discussion is over, there is recess. That is, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha take a holiday. That is, not a holiday, they have a lot of work during that recess period, but you could generalize it as, for all the parliamentary purposes as we know it, you could say yes, there is no parliament meeting and there is some other work going on. What's the other work in the recess? The recess lasts for about 30 days, about a month. What do the members of parliament do? You know, in the recess 30 days, departmentally related standing committees, they are called DRSCs. For the last 30 years, that is, since 1993, these committees have been doing the work in the recess. What is their work? How are they formed? Who makes up these committees? These committees are joint parliamentary committees. They have 31 members each, drawn from Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha has 1/3 members, Lok Sabha has 2/3 members. And the members are nominated by the respective presiding officers. And for 8 committees, there are 24 committees all in all. For 8 committees, the chairman is appointed by the Rajya Sabha. For 16 committees, the chairman is appointed by the Speaker, Lok Sabha. So, you got 24 committees, each committee having 31, but you've got 58 ministries. So, what do? The function of these committees primarily, what they do during the recess period is, when the executive wants the Lok Sabha to sanction money, which is what you call the budgetary expenditure, that takes the form of demands for grants. For example, Ministry of Home Affairs asks the Lok Sabha, give me 1 lakh rupees. Ministry of Agriculture asks the Lok Sabha, give me 75,000 crores of rupees. I am being very wild in my numbers, not very wild maybe. So Lok Sabha is being demanded, that's a colonial term, is being requested by the executive, the ministers, council of ministers, give me this much money, I need so much of money, I have worked for that much of money, I have programs and so on and so forth. So there are 58 ministries, about 80 plus departments, all of them together require money. This money, most of it, is being sought from the Lok Sabha in the form of demands for grants. So these demands for grants, when they are presented in the Lok Sabha by the Honorable Finance Minister, they are broken down to the last paisa. For what service do you want the money? Take the example of Ministry of Education. How much money is required for salary, teaching, non-teaching, for the infrastructure, for higher education, technical education, medical education, primary education, secondary education. Each of these services, the expenditure required of them is broken down to the last paisa. And these are gone into by the ministries, by the departmental related standing committees. If it's a large ministry like Home or Agriculture, an entire departmentally related standing committee scrutinizes and reports on the demand for grant. If they are smaller ministries, for example, renewable energy, or for that matter, it is about skilling and so on, then one committee takes care of 2 or 3 ministries. So you got a month's time, you are 24 committees, you've got to scrutinize the demands for grants of the ministries under your domain, and you do it and present the report when the Parliament resumes its work. Who do you present the report to? If the chairperson is appointed by the Speaker, you present the reports to the Speaker. If the chairperson is appointed by the chairman of Rajya Sabha, present it in the Rajya Sabha to the Honorable Chairperson. So the reports are presented. That is when the recess ends and the reports are presented. Now, what is the value of these reports, etc.? We'll come back in a separate class. For the time being, let's stay focused about the passage of the budget, the steps in the process. Now, what happens when the recess closes and the Parliament resumes? Remember, we are still in the Lok Sabha. Rajya Sabha is still in the process of deliberation. It's not called upon to act in a manner that impacts on the budget yet. Now, so you have resumed. You are talking about the middle of March. You've got another 15 days to pass the budget. So now, in the recess, the Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, the chief whips of the political parties, the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, leaders of opposition, leader of House, all of them sit down and chalk out about the business that should be taken up after the recess of the Parliament ends and the parliamentary proceedings resume. So, the ministry sought the Lok Sabha, asked the Lok Sabha to grant them some money. Lok Sabha hasn't granted any money. So far it's been talk and scrutiny. Now we are getting down to the brass tacks. That is, the Lok Sabha is getting down to approving the demands for grants, just as the proceedings have resumed. Now, any member of Lok Sabha can say that the demand for grant being sought is to be cut down. You call them cut motions. Cut motions. Motion is all the business of the House runs on motions. Every little work you want to do in the Parliament begins with a motion, ends with the motion being passed. So cut motion is what? A member can go to the Honorable Speaker, tell the Honorable Speaker, sir, I want to move a cut motion. If the Speaker says, okay, go ahead, then you can go ahead. If the Speaker says, no, I'm not convinced about the genuineness of your cut motion, then the Speaker doesn't allow the cut motion to be moved. That's the end of the matter. Assume that the Speaker allows cut motions to be passed. There are three types of cut motions. One is disapproval of policy. Another is token. Still another is economy. Three types of cut motion. Provided the Speaker allows. So you try to, if the Speaker allows, you move a disapproval of policy cut motion, which means, I told you Ministry of Home Affairs wants 1 lakh crores of rupees. You move a cut motion proposing to cut the entire demand of grant to 1 rupee. 1 rupee. And if it's a token motion, you are happy but you are not happy. You are indicating to the Honorable Minister that you want to take away 100 rupees from the demand for grant. That is, if the demand for grant is worth 1 lakh crores, you take away 100 rupees from it. Just a token. And mild displeasure you are indicating, symbolically telling the Honorable Minister, please improve. I'm happy but not entirely. So that is a token cut. And like token and the disapproval of policy cut, there is another economy cut, which says that, you want 1 lakh crores of rupees, but my belief is that you can save money and you can spend less. Maybe 10,000 crores less, maybe 5,000 crores less, but surely you can spend less. That is economy. That is cut corners. Make savings. Don't waste money. Show efficiency. Gain in the process. So these are the messages of the economy cut. And if the cut motion is passed, then what happens? We don't know, because cut motion is not given in the Constitution. It's not given in the Parliamentary Act. It is a part of the rules of procedure and conduct of business. So it means that the consequence of the cut motion may not be the same as the consequence of the no confidence motion. However, if the cut motion is passed in the Lok Sabha, which is the house of the ruling party, the house of the government, it relates to money, and that is the crux of the entire process of governance. And if the cut motion is passed, it is a serious development, after which it is incumbent on the government to show that it enjoys majority in Lok Sabha. Budget can be changed and passed to the satisfaction of all the political parties, because the nation needs the budget, not just the government. But what will be the fate of the government after the cut motion is passed? We never had a cut motion passed, and therefore we don't know what happens if the cut motion is passed. But it can be assumed, it's possible that the finance minister may have to resign. It is also possible cut motion is not the no confidence motion, which means that the government need not resign. So, okay, you got 58 ministries, and in the 58 ministries, all of them presented demands for grants. I told you already there will be more than 80 demands for grants of the departments. Departments make up the ministry. So do you have the time to discuss the demands for grants at a minute level of all the 58 ministries? No. In fact, you had the 1 month recess so that the dedicated departmentally related standing committees could take up the work. So it is not sensible for you to allot again so much of time. And all the people I've mentioned just now, the Honorable Speaker, the Prime Minister, opposition leaders of the House, Chief Whips and so on, All of them will say some ministries' demands for grants we will discuss. After that, we will move a closure motion. We will close the debate and we will guillotine. That is, some demands for grants have been discussed and most demands for grants have not been discussed. Let's bunch both of them together. Let's cut the discussion out. Let's close the debate and pass them. Passing without debate or discussion is called guillotine. Remember guillotine? All of you know what happened during the French Revolution, when the guillotine was used to cut the head of the people who opposed the system. So, with the passing of the demands for grants, Lok Sabha has told the government that all the money you wanted, we have granted. But just wait, I have to add another dimension here, which is the following. See, let's call them demands for grants. Let us call these charged expenditure. Now, why? Let me explain. See, together, this is the union budget. The entire money which you wanted the Lok Sabha to grant it to you makes up the budgetary expenditure in totality. Let's say 100 rupees. In that 100 rupees, this is demand for grants, and that should be approximately 75% of the total budgeted expenditure. And the rest is what? Charged expenditure. Charged expenditure. There is enough room for confusion here, so let me step in. Remember, this is the Consolidated Fund of India. From here, you have charged expenditure as well as demand for grants. So 100 rupees is the total budget. Approximately 75 is the demand for grant. Approximately 25 is the charged expenditure. And what has the Lok Sabha sanctioned to you? All the demands for grants. What is charged expenditure? It's a technical term. You know, all money goes out of the CFI only. Whatever other money there is, we will talk about it later. Budget is about Consolidated Fund of India. Certain other connections, we'll develop them as we go on. So, there is 100 rupees in the CFI. That's what the budget is about. In this 75, Lok Sabha could vote on it. What are the cut motions? If you want to cut it down, you could cut it down. But there is another type of expenditure on which the power of the Lok Sabha does not extend to voting. It is non-votable. I'll tell you why. It's non-votable because it is committed expenditure. For example, you have borrowed money from the market. You have to return the money to the market. Why should you give Lok Sabha the power to reduce the amount? You can't reduce the amount. You borrowed 100 at 7%, 107 rupees you have to give to the market that lent you the money. So, Lok Sabha has no power to reduce the amount, and that is separately shown. Article 112 talks about it. I told you 112 here that talks about the annual financial statement. In that it is said that demands for grants and charged expenditure have to be shown separately, because one is votable, the other is non-votable. Votable is demand for grants, non-votable. I'll give you one more example. Your own Union Public Service Commission. The salaries, allowances, pensions and the entire expenditure on the establishment, they are all charged. Because if the Lok Sabha can cut it down, that can be used to put pressure on the UPSC to work in a certain direction. And UPSC does not like it. Supreme Court doesn't like it. Comptroller and Auditor General of India doesn't like it. So for them to function without fear of favor, the expenditure related to these bodies is non-votable. It has to be given to them, and so it is called charged. Charged means guaranteed. They're guaranteeing you. Even Lok Sabha does not have the power to vote on it. So that is about 25% approximately, and the rest is demands for grants, which is 75. Together it is 100, which is the totality, the total amount of the Consolidated Fund of India. So charged expenditure is non-votable, that is as good as given, that is given, and the 75 is voted upon and granted to you. But there is still a bit of time left for celebration. Why? Because the Lok Sabha told you, come to me, I will grant you the 100. They have said, okay, the 100 is yours, but follow the procedure. What is the procedure? Appropriation bill. Every paisa from the Consolidated Fund of India to be drawn requires the passage of an appropriation bill. Appropriation bill is a money bill. What is the money bill? We'll talk about it. That is a separate Mahabharat in its own right. We will handle that as clearly as it gets. That's later. Now, appropriation bill. So, your 100 rupees you wanted. Lok Sabha said, okay, granted, 75, the other 25 is taken for granted. So 100, for you to be able to dip into the Consolidated Fund of India, take money out of it, you are required to pass appropriation bill, because that's the only way you can take money out of the Consolidated Fund of India. Article 266 clearly says that an appropriation bill is required to take money out of the Consolidated Fund of India. So you pass it. And once you pass it, the money in the CFI, as much as you wanted and as much as was granted, that is all yours. You can spend it across the entire fiscal year. So now you've got the appropriation bill. To give you few more details, it's a bill. A bill necessarily requires the participation of both the houses. A money bill requires Rajya Sabha to appropriation bill is a money bill. You know, Rajya Sabha powers are very limited. So Lok Sabha has passed it, goes to Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha can take 14 days to talk about it. Rajya Sabha can propose amendments. They have value or not, they don't have value. That's decided by the Lok Sabha. Rajya Sabha has no binding power over the Lok Sabha. It can only suggest it to Lok Sabha. 14 days, deliberation, proposing, suggesting recommendations, subject to acceptance by Lok Sabha. These are the only powers that the Rajya Sabha has. And remember, the powers of Rajya Sabha related to the money bill are not called passage. Rajya Sabha doesn't have to pass it. Rajya Sabha says, you please the Constitution tells the Rajya Sabha, please consider and return. Consider and return. You have no power to pass it. Consider and return. And how will the Rajya Sabha know whether it's a money bill or not? Honorable Speaker, according to Article 110, certifies a bill to be money bill at the time of its transmission to Rajya Sabha, so that Rajya Sabha knows what to do with the bill. Because the powers of Rajya Sabha related to a certain bill depend upon what is the nature of the bill. The Honorable Speaker is clearly certifying it's a money bill, and therefore Rajya Sabha knows what to do and how far to stretch its powers. So the bill is back with the Lok Sabha, and the Honorable Speaker once again certifies the bill to be a money bill, so that when it goes to the Honorable President of India, the President of India knows what to do. Because whether it is ordinary bill or money bill or constitution amendment bill, the powers of the President of India are different. For a money bill, the powers are different. We will know it when we talk of the money bill. So the President of India is told by the Speaker, when Speaker certifies the bill to be a money bill, sir or madam, you have to do X, Y, Z and not Z, because it is a money bill. And the Honorable President acts accordingly. And that is when the appropriation bill, which is a form of money bill, is passed. And the Government of India gets the permission of the Parliament to draw money from the Consolidated Fund of India as much as was sought and granted. Now, so far what has transpired? Only drawing money. But Lok Sabha and Parliament, they have not authorized the Government of India to raise money. How do you raise money? Essentially by way of taxes. So finance bill is still not passed. So after the passage of the appropriation bill, you come to finance bill. You come to finance bill. I'll give it a separate color. So what is the finance bill? We already know this. It is the bill that contains taxation proposals, income tax, corporate tax, securities transaction tax, capital gains tax, what have you. All of them are contained in the finance bill, and you propose to Lok Sabha. This is what the government seeks to do. Remember one thing, there's been a convention. What is the convention? Whatever the tax rate proposed by the Honorable Finance Minister can be accepted or lowered, but the Lok Sabha has no power to ask for an increase in the rate. After all, the members of Lok Sabha are sitting there to protect our interests. They can't propose that the tax rates be increased. That is a convention which is being followed. You cannot propose that. So all right, finance bill is introduced and the Lok Sabha discusses it, wants to make changes. It can make changes. It can try to make changes. If the government is impressed with the proposals, the government will accommodate the changes. And finally, it is also a money bill. Finance bill is a money bill, classical money bill. Like appropriation bill was a classical money bill. Why do I say classical? Very simple. The first line in Article 110 is what? It is about taxation matters, imposition, regulation, deletion, alteration, etc. So appropriation bill is a classical money bill, which means the money bill 110 tells you that if you want to draw money from the Consolidated Fund of India, you have to do so only by passing an appropriation bill. So finance bill is passed, it's a money bill, the Speaker certifies that it's a money bill, and then it is taken up by the Rajya Sabha to consider and return. Same rules apply, comes back to Lok Sabha, and the Honorable Speaker once again certifies at the time of transmission to the Honorable President, the choices of the President available to him for a money bill are indicated to him in the process, and the President accordingly acts. And so the entire budgetary process has been gone through. And what are the steps in this process? The sequential steps, let's put them in a single list and of course in a separate color. So, introduction, general discussion, recess for departmentally related standing committees to scrutinize the demands for grants of the ministries that fall within their jurisdiction. After that, cut motions if any. Recess ends. After recess, what happens? Cut motions, if allowed. Passing of demands of grants, demands for grants, and appropriation bill, and finally finance bill. So, let me number them. Not number, let me give them icons. Introduction, general discussion, recess, after recess, demands for grants being passed, appropriation bill, finance bill. That is when the budget has been passed. The money you wanted, granted to you. The way you want to spend, that's also been sanctioned by the Lok Sabha and the Parliament. Now, why do you call it a subject in political economy? Why is it not merely the economics, the public finance? Why is it not the constitution? Why do you call it political economy? That is because budget is a socio-economic statement. The way you raise money, the way you spend money leaves the fingerprints of the government that has a certain philosophy. There are shades and shades of orientation of politics and priorities. There is one school of politics that says open up the economy. Another school of politics that says close the economy. One school says give tax concessions to the corporates so that they will invest money, generate growth, and the growth sooner than later will help everybody, which is what you call trickle down effect. Another school says that tax the rich more. You need more money to spend on the poor and the lower income people. Schooling, college education, health, infrastructure, welfare, all of them have to be supplied, for which you need the money, and the only people who can afford to pay the tax are the rich people. Tax them. Two different schools of thought altogether. One school says let the government invest in railways. Another school says give it over to the private sector. One school says don't tax the middle class so much. One school says tax the middle class as well. How else can you build up the country? One school says privatize the public sector companies. Another school says don't privatize, actually nationalize. So, you know, these are the political priorities. They are reflected in the budget. How do you raise money? How do you spend money? That is why budget is a reflection of the political economy. The economic policy of the political party is seen in the priorities which are in the budget. That is the political economy. So, we have covered today approximately the Magna Carta, as much as is required, and why should the Parliament come into the picture while Government budget is being passed. Taxation without representation is not welcome. And then we said introduction and so on. After that, general discussion, departmentally related standing committees. Then we talked of cut motions, we talked of Guillotine, passage of the Appropriation Bill, and then we talked of the passage of the Finance Bill. This is one part of the parliamentary control over the public finance. You know what all things we haven't talked about? We have not talked about money bill in all the detail. We have not talked about financial bills. Article 117 A and B. We haven't talked about various types of demands for grants. We haven't talked about. We also haven't talked about Consolidated Fund of India, contingency we haven't talked about. We also haven't talked about Public Account of India. And remember, what about the financial committees? Financial committees, for example, Public Accounts Committee, Estimates Committee. We haven't talked about Committee on Public Undertakings. We haven't. None of these three committees we have spoken about. We will do it because the lecture is so critical, the subject is so difficult. If we cram everything into a single session, it's quite likely that the essential thread could be missed. And therefore, this we haven't talked about. And remember, we also haven't talked about in parliamentary control over public finance, fiscal responsibility and Budget Management Act. We haven't talked about. We need to. We will do it in the upcoming classes. And we have to do it slowly, steadily. We have to do it in such a manner that a person who is completely oblivious, that is a person who doesn't know anything about government finance, the budget, tax, duty, loans, revenue, capital, a person who doesn't know anything about them should find them so easy and so interesting, and in future he should become a public finance expert within the Government of India. Remember, IAS officers specialize, IRS officers specialize, some of them become public finance experts. Nation looks to them for wise comments, commentary, and the person who doesn't know anything as of now should become one such leading expert. That is the objective of the classes. Because I told you, please recall, I told you no one should be miscoached. No one should miss coaching for want of financial resources. That's why we are sweating it out for you day in, day out. Classes are going to commence on the 12th of April. Enroll, get your friends and neighbors enrolled, make this program so popular that no one has his dreams unrealized. Wish you all the best. See you tomorrow.